Saudi Arabia is a nation that keeps up its image of wealth, oil, gold, and most of such adornments, such that a person who thinks of the nation has fleeting images of all of the good and rich within the country. But what is the dark, sand-shadowed side of this country that makes it to the list of the world's top 10 human rights violators? Welcome back to Life of the Wealthy. We are here to reveal the dark side of Saudi Arabia. Watch until the end of this video to know more. Raif Badawi, a blogger who had been given 1,000 lashes and 10 years in prison for insulting Islam and creating an online forum for political discussion, was publicly flogged by Saudi Arabian authorities in February of 2015. Raif's lashes, which were scheduled to apply 50 times a week, have thus far been postponed each week. The authorities cited medical advice from experts who examined Raif and determined that his wounds hadn't healed enough for him to be flogged again safely until the first few weeks of January. Raif has recently avoided being publicly flogged by Saudi Arabian officials without being given an explanation. He is still informed each week whether his 950 lashes will resume that week. Raif has garnered news coverage all around the world. However, his story is only the most recent example of the Gulf Kingdom's horrendous human rights record. In Saudi Arabia, courts frequently order unfair trials before imposing torture sentences for a variety of crimes. Flogging is one form of corporal punishment that is brutal, inhumane, and degrading and has no place in the legal system. Along with Raif, human rights activist Omar al-Said and Miklif bin Daham al-Shamari, as well as Filipino domestic servant Ruth Rojas, have all received sentences of 200 or 300 lashes in the past 2 years. Amputations, including cross amputations, that is, when the opposing hand and foot are removed, have been performed by Saudi officials as a method of torture on robbery suspects. Every year, the Saudi government executes scores of individuals, many of them in public beheadings, making it one of the world's top executioners. Saudi Arabia executed 138 people in 2022, nearly the number of executions during the period in 2016. Along with Raif Badawi, numerous other vocal activists continue to be imprisoned for nothing more than expressing their right to free speech, association, and assembly. All of Saudi Arabia's well-known and independent human rights campaigners have either been jailed, intimidated into silence, or departed the nation in the past 2 years. The government has specifically targeted the tiny but voiceless group of human rights advocates, including by utilizing anti-terrorism laws to stifle their non-violent efforts to draw attention and to readdress human rights abuses. Laws that ensure that women and girls are subordinate citizens to men, particularly in relation to family concerns like marriage, divorce, child custody, and inheritance, continue to expose them to discrimination in both theory and practice. Threats of arrest, as well as other forms of harassment and intimidation, are directed at women who backed a campaign against a ban of women drivers. Former detainees, trial defendants, and others have informed journalists that torture is a common practice among security forces in captivity and that those culpable are never held accountable. Numerous persons have been imprisoned in pre-trial detention for at least 6 months after being arrested, violating the kingdom's penal laws. During their interrogation, detainees are typically kept incommunicado and denied access to their attorneys. Several human rights advocates have been held without being charged or put on trial for more than 2 years. The majority of the kingdom's Shia residents live in the oil-rich eastern province, where prejudice against them is still endemic and limits their access to employment opportunities and public services. Thousands of people were abruptly sent back to Somalia, Yemen, or other countries where they might have experienced human rights violations. The Saudi Arabian government continues to bar independent human rights organizations like Amnesty International from entering the country. They have a history of retaliating against activists and the relatives of victims who contact us by taking legal action, among other sanctions. In 2020, Saudi authorities persisted in repressing dissenters, human rights advocates, and independent clergy. Famous women's rights advocates who were jailed in 2018, including Laujan al-Hathlol, Maya al-Zarani, Samar Badawi, Nauf Abdulaziz, and Nasima al-Sadar, remain in detention as they are being tried for campaigning on behalf of women. Detainees who are still facing death sentences were accused of nothing more than non-violent resistance and action. By November, famous preacher Salman al-Auda, who was accused of having ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and of publicly supporting prisoners of conscience, as well as Hassan Farhan al-Maliki, who was accused of expressing his non-violent religious beliefs, were among those facing the death penalty. If you're still watching this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. In 2020, authorities detained senior royal family members and imprisoned them incommunicado, including former Crown Prince Mohammed bin Naif and former Saudi Red Crescent leader Faisal bin Abdullah. As of the time of recording, their legal situation was still unknown. In March, Saudi Arabia began a mass trial against 68 Jordanians and Palestinians who had been jailed since the beginning of 2018 on flimsy charges of having connections to a terrorist organization. Following the arrests, relatives of the accused gave detailed accounts on a variety of atrocities committed by Saudi officials, including torture, forced disappearances, and prolonged solitary incarceration. Although there are no explicit rules in Saudi Arabia governing sexual orientation or gender identity, judges can be punished for extramarital affairs, adultery, and homosexual intercourse under uncodified Islamic principles. Judges and prosecutors may use ambiguous portions of the nation's anti-cybercrime statute that make it illegal to engage in online behavior that violates public order, religious values, public morals, and privacy if people are doing so. A Yemeni blogger was sentenced in July by a Saudi court to 10 months in prison, a $2,700 fine, and deportation to Yemen for posting a social media video advocating for equal rights, including for LGBT individuals. He left Yemen in June of 2019 after being threatened with death by the Yemeni armed groups, and he has since been living there as an undocumented immigrant in Saudi Arabia. Sharia, or Islamic law, is the national law of Saudi Arabia. Although there isn't a formal penal code, the government has approved various laws and regulations that criminalize a number of offenses with broad definitions. Children who are detained frequently experience systematic abuses of their rights to a fair trial and due process, including arbitrary arrest. Defendants are frequently given hundreds of whips as punishment by judges. If a child exhibits outward indications of puberty, they may be tried as adults and sentenced to death. Judges in 2020 used confessions that some defendants later recanted in court and claimed had been obtained through torture. The court did not look into these claims. Saudi women still need a male guardian's consent to get married, leave prison, or receive certain healthcare services, despite significant advancements in women's rights in the recent years, such as the removal of travel restrictions. For instance, women over 21 can now obtain passports and travel abroad without a guardian's permission. In addition, prejudice against women still exists in the areas of marriage, family, divorce, and choices involving children, such as a child custody. Males can still sue daughters, wives, or female relatives who are under their care for disobedience, which can result in jail or a forced return to the house of the male guardian. Women's rights advocates continue to be detained or tried for their non-violent advocacy. In Saudi Arabia, millions of migrant workers work primarily in manual, administrative, and service jobs. An exodus of migrant workers from Saudi Arabia resulted from government efforts to increase citizen employment by nationalizing the labor force. Nevertheless, images of the victims and their testimonies continue to circulate to demonstrate that Saudi Arabia's efforts to present a false picture will not be able to conceal the severity of the violations, despite the continuation of sports, academic, diplomatic, and recreational laundry campaigns and the payment of billions. And with that, we have come to the end of today's video. If you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click the bell icon below. Let us know in the comments your suggestions for new videos, and also refer to other videos on our channel. Thank you for joining, and we will see you in the next video.